since COVID, we have a huge influx of immigration. It was said by the federal government that they wanted to accept, I think it was up to 1 million immigrants a year because Canada needs it. Our birth rate is too low. We Canadians don't have enough children, and our population is aging and shrinking. And we need labor. So we need immigrants. Now, these immigrants, they need to be housed. We need to build, and we need to build not only to keep up with local demand, but we also need to build to take those immigrants who are coming in. So because there's more and more demand with pretty much less or the same amount of supply, mechanically, from an economic standpoint, it's been putting huge upwards pressure on rents. Okay, basic supply and demand. So we're not creating more housing. There's more people looking for houses and dwellings. Therefore, the price of rent goes up. Now, we need to build more. Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec. And today we're going to have a very Quebec topic. We're going to be talking about the government's announcement to cut the GST on new rental buildings. But before we dive into it, I just want to remind everyone, thank you for sharing this episode and the show with a friend who you feel could benefit from this conversation. Leave us a comment, a rating. It always helps. If you're listening on your phone, I think you can click on the 3 little buttons in the top right corner and go subscribe, and it will help us reach more people just like you. And you can also visit our website, realestateeffect.ca, check out for events and other things that we're doing. So it was announced last week by the federal government that a new measure to encourage new building would be to cut the GST, the goods sales tax, on new rental buildings. So what does that mean? First, before we can go into it and exactly dissect what it means for the industry, let's just make sure we're all on the same page and we understand. So let's say you build a $10 million building, okay, 30 units, brand new, and you're looking to buy this from a builder. He sells it to you for $10 million. Literally, the day you take possession, you're supposed to get it assessed, and then you have to send that assessment to Revenue Canada. And then they look and they calculate, and you basically owe them 5%. So basically on a 10 million, I'm just picking round numbers, okay, for sake of conversation. On a $10 million building, you're looking at about 5%, so about 500,000. And you're looking at also then the provincial sales tax for, at least in Quebec right now, 9.9. So you have in total about 15% in taxes. Now, the federal government announced that the 5% that goes to the federal government is going to be removed, and there's going to be an exemption. Now, that is a good news, technically, because then it reduces the cost of acquiring buildings. Therefore, we live in a capitalist system. So then more people, more investors, more developers are going to want to build because they got a small incentive given the big crisis that we're in right now. So I'll just kind of stop there on the explanation. I just want to give a little bit more background for those who've been living under a rock for the last 3 years. So since COVID, we have a huge influx of immigration. It was said by the federal government that they wanted to accept, I think it was up to 1 million immigrants a year because Canada needs it. Our birth rate is too low. We Canadians don't have enough children, and our population is aging and shrinking, and we need labor. So we need immigrants. Now, these immigrants, they need to be housed. We need to build, and we need to build not only to keep up with local demand, but we also need to build to take those immigrants who are coming in. So because there's more and more demand with pretty much less or the same amount of supply, mechanically, from an economic standpoint, it's been putting huge upwards pressure on rents, okay, basic supply and demand. So we're not creating more housing. There's more people looking for houses and dwellings. Therefore, the price of rent goes up. Now, we need to build more. Now, building more, it's not just a snap of a finger. It's an 18-month to 2-year process because people just think like, oh, you just excavate and pour foundation and put wood and put up walls and stuff. Yes, but they forget that there is 6 months or 1 year of work ahead of that you don't see, and for the entire development process, the permitting, working with the city, so that by the time you start your construction, to me, you're like 2/3 done. This exemption, this cut of the GST from the federal government, is viewed in different ways. Is it a short-term quick fix? No. It's not because they did this that 6 months from now, there's going to be an extra 50,000 dwellings for rent on the market in Quebec. Let's be honest. Let's forget about that. Now, is it a medium to long-term? Yes, because again, it's going to take what's decided now. It's going to take 18 months to 2 years to be worked throughout the system so that those projects actually benefit from it. We will see it maybe starting a year from now with a small increase in supply. Now, every time there is a cut, again, we live in a capitalist system where, and I'm just going to make a parallel with oil companies. During COVID, if you remember, there was at first, price of gas plummeted, and then there was a spike. When there was that spike, the government said, well, okay, so then we'll cut the level of tax. And it was mentioned by the finance minister that the worry was that if the government was going to pull back on the tax, oil companies would actually pocket that difference because the price at the pump wouldn't change much. It's just the split between oil companies and the government would be different, but the price at the pump for consumers would remain stable. And so some are arguing that this is kind of be the same thing, that, well, developers are going to be making a little more money, but there isn't really going to be an increase in supply in the short and medium term. There's really different ways to look at this. Who's building housing and rental housing right now? Well, crickets. No one. But no, there are some. Well, it's not the government. It's not the provincial government. It's not the federal government. It's developers and it's investors. Now, these people need to be supported, and I'm one of them. Am I biased? Of course I am. And I'd rather say it completely. It's just that if it becomes a little bit more attractive to be able to buy and build this, and when I say attractive, it's not like our return is going to be so much bigger. It's just that they just created a smaller step to remove a little bit of the barriers. It's not because they removed the 5% GST that all of a sudden I'm going to be making so much more money. What it's really going to mean is that my project just becomes a little bit more viable. End of story. So if I was building, thousands of units a year, yeah, it would probably make a significant difference. In my case, not yet enough. Now, another point that's important is, some are saying, yeah, but what difference is it really going to make for people who are looking for housing right now? Let's think of a family of two, a couple and 2 kids. They're looking for a 2-bedroom apartment. What's really going to happen? For now, not much. I hate to say it. The difference is going to be in a year, 18 months, 2 years, and so on and so forth. The federal government took that decision. Now, again, let's think back of the tax structure. It's about 5% for the federal government and about 10% of tax, depending on the province. In Quebec, it's 9.975 of the provincial tax. Now, the federal government has also encouraged the provinces for a tax cut. Now, Ontario's done it. British Columbia's done it. I think so far New Brunswick and Labrador have done it. And Quebec, which we are in, came back and said, no, we're not going to do it. It's going to cost us 1.5 billion. Okay, but then you're not helping either, because that would have been, another significant step in the direction for more housing. But now the province is saying, well, we don't really think it's going to make a difference, and we're not going to do it. And we would lose, because obviously the minute the government says we're cutting a tax, then the government is also making less tax revenue. So it needs to be predicted that the medium and long-term benefit must outweigh the tax collection loss. And I am not qualified to be able to make that call. It takes, strong economists at the Bank of Canada, the Ministry of Finance, and so on, to be able to make those calculations and assessments. Do I think it's a step in the right direction? Yes, of course. Is it going to make a significant change and impact in the short term? No. We all benefit in the long run from also a provincial tax cut. Yes, absolutely. And François Legault, it was mentioned, I think, yesterday on the 20th of September, that he did not want to cut the QST, the provincial sales tax, on purpose rental built, nor on construction materials. So from that standpoint, there's going to be no contribution at the Quebec level. It's interesting. I really wonder what's gonna happen. It does affect all of us here some way, somehow. And I wish I could almost fast forward 2 years to see really what's going to be the impact of this. I'd love to hear from you about it. I hope this was somewhat of a clear explanation and try to keep it in simple terms. Let me know what you think. And I will be continuing on this because I know there's going to be some other developments, no pun intended, about this policy. So we'll be able to look at the impact, see where it had. And I am looking, and if you have someone to suggest, please send me a message, reach out, email, text, social media and stuff. If you have an idea of an expert who could come and talk to us about this, someone with finance and economics background, I'd love to have them on to give more of an in-depth analysis. So please reach out. Thank you for following. Share this episode with a friend, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.